A statue standing 182 meters tall doubles the height of the Statue of Liberty, and that's not even the most disturbing thing humans have built. Somewhere on Earth right now, there's a hole so deep it's visible from orbit, a dam so heavy it measurably slowed the planet's rotation, and an airport the exact size of an entire city that sits almost completely empty. 13 construction projects on this list hide an urgent, desperate, or outright disturbing reason behind their scale. And we're saving the one that cost more human lives than most modern wars for the very end. Join us and let's discover the most gigantic objects humanity has ever built. Let's go.
Topic number 13. Bingham Canyon Mine. A hole so deep it swallows skyscrapers whole sits carved into the Utah mountains, and it started because two brothers were simply herding cattle. Bingham Canyon Mine plunges 1.2 kilometers straight down and stretches 4 kilometers wide, a wound in the earth so massive it's visible from orbit. Picture the Empire State Building dropped into this pit. It would vanish, swallowed completely, with room to spare above it. Mining started in 1906 and never stopped. Over a century later, the operation runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with 80 haul trucks, each hauling 320 tons of rock per trip. Crews detonate 540 kilograms of explosives daily just to keep the hole growing wider and deeper. The math is staggering. 19 million tons of copper already pulled from the ground, with an estimated 2.11 million tons still buried beneath the rubble. Every smartphone, every power line, every electric motor on Earth owes something to this pit. But copper wasn't the only resource humans decided to chase at any cost. Some went after sunlight instead and turned an entire desert into a machine.
Topic number 12. Meidong Solar Park. An entire desert stopped advancing because of 5 million pieces of glass and metal. Meidong Solar Park stretches across 133 square kilometers of Chinese desert, enough space to fit 18,600 football fields side by side, all glinting under relentless sun. China built this in the Taklamakan Desert on purpose, because that stretch of sand gets roughly 340 sunny days a year, one of the most brutally efficient places on Earth to harvest light. The plant now powers 3 million homes annually, and it cost $2.13 billion to build, a fraction of what the same project costs in the United States. A web of cables spanning 208 kilometers ties the entire system together, carrying electricity out of one of the most remote regions on the planet. But the panels don't just generate power, they physically block the wind, slowing the advance of sand dunes that have swallowed entire towns for centuries. One installation, 2 functions, generating clean energy while fighting off the desert itself, panel by panel. It went fully operational in 2024. And while this plant fights a desert on Earth, humans built something else that had to survive somewhere far more hostile than any desert ever could be.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
$150 billion. Enough to build over 3,000 skyscrapers the size of the Burj Khalifa. And instead, humanity spent it on a laboratory floating 400 kilometers above your head right now. Nobody built this thing from the ground up. It was assembled piece by piece, more than 40 separate modules bolted together directly in orbit, with astronauts working in the vacuum of space to snap the pieces into place by hand. Construction began in 1998, and 5 space agencies threw their resources into it: NASA, Russia's Roscosmos, Europe's ESA, Japan's JAXA, and Canada's CSA, backed by 16 countries total. The finished structure measures 109 meters long and 73 meters wide, bigger than a football field, hurtling through space at 27,600 kilometers per hour. It completes a full orbit of Earth every 90 minutes, which means the astronauts living inside witness 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every single day. It's the largest man-made object ever placed in space, visible from the ground with nothing but your own eyes if you know exactly when to look up. Down on the surface, though, humans were building something meant to terrify anyone who dared to walk across it.
Topic number 10. Millau Viaduct. Base jumpers throw themselves off this bridge for fun, and it's still classified as one of the safest structures ever engineered. The Millau Viaduct rises 343 meters above the Tarn Valley in southern France, taller than the Eiffel Tower, making it the tallest bridge on the planet. Before this bridge existed, drivers crossing this valley sat in traffic for up to 4 hours during peak season, funneled into a single bottleneck between northern France and the Mediterranean coast. Architect Norman Foster and engineer Michel Villogeux solved it by building something almost absurd: 7 razor-thin pylons supporting a roadway 2 lanes wide in each direction, floating 270 meters above the valley floor. The tallest pylon alone is taller than most skyscrapers on Earth. Construction ran just 39 months, using 290,000 tons of steel and concrete, held together by 1,500 tons of steel cable. Engineers even curved the road slightly on purpose, because a perfectly straight line at that height creates a disorienting illusion for drivers, a trick of the eyes that could send a car drifting off course without anyone touching the wheel. Since opening in 2004, it has become one of the most photographed engineering feats on the planet. But height alone isn't the scariest thing humans have built. What came next generated more raw power than anything else on this entire list.
One single dam produced more electricity in 12 months than any other power plant humans have ever built, anywhere, in any year, in all of history. Itaipu Dam stretches nearly 8 kilometers across the Paraná River on the border between Brazil and Paraguay, standing 196 meters tall. In 2016, it generated over 103 million megawatt-hours of electricity, a world record that stunned even the engineers who built it. This dam supplies roughly 15% of all electricity used in Brazil, and an almost unbelievable 86% of everything consumed in Paraguay. Construction ran from 1975 to 1984, requiring workers to excavate 50 million tons of earth and pour 12.3 million cubic meters of concrete. The iron and steel used to build it would be enough to construct 380 Eiffel Towers, stacked one after another. 20 separate turbine units sit inside the dam, each one powerful enough on its own to supply the entire residential electricity demand of Paraguay. The reservoir behind this dam has a darker footnote, though. Filling it in 1982 permanently drowned Sete Caídas Falls, once the largest waterfall on Earth by water volume, erased from the map in just 14 days. Humans silenced a waterfall bigger than Niagara to build this, and what they buried underground next makes a drowned waterfall look small.
Topic number 8. Chand Bari. A staircase spirals 20 meters straight down into the earth, 3,500 steps carved by hand, and it was built purely so a community wouldn't die of thirst. Chand Bari sits in Rajasthan, India, constructed sometime in the 8th or 9th century in a region where scorching heat and scarce water made survival a constant battle. The stepwell descends 13 stories underground in a hypnotic, perfectly symmetrical spiral pattern, precise enough that photographs of it are still mistaken today for computer-generated art. Communities used the cooler lower chambers as shelter from unbearable daytime heat, turning a water source into a communal refuge where people gathered, bathed, and waited out the worst of the sun. There was no machinery, no modern surveying equipment, nothing but hand tools and generations of laborers repeating the same geometric pattern with mathematical precision. The structure has survived more than 1,000 years with almost no reinforcement, outlasting the empires and dynasties that built it. But an underground staircase built for water is nothing compared to what one desperate country built next, purely to hold itself together as one nation. Topic number 7. Burj Khalifa. Everything before this item on the list was built to solve a problem or generate power. This one was built purely to be seen. Dubai's leaders knew their oil would eventually run dry, and their answer was a needle of steel and glass punching 828 meters into the sky, nearly 3 Eiffel Towers stacked directly on top of each other. Construction ran from 2004 to 2010, and on the most intense days, 12,000 workers from over 100 different countries swarmed the site simultaneously. They poured 330,000 cubic meters of concrete and hauled up 39,000 tons of steel, wrapping the tower in 26,000 glass panels engineered specifically to survive desert heat that can melt asphalt. It's visible from 95 kilometers away, a monument built purely for spectacle in a city desperate to be noticed. An elevator inside climbs 140 floors without stopping, moving at 10 meters per second, reaching the observation deck in roughly 1 minute. The final cost hit $15.5 billion. Since 2010, not one building on Earth has come close to touching its record. But height built with modern steel is one thing. What came thousands of years earlier, with nothing but stone and bare hands, is where this list gets genuinely hard to believe.
Topic number 6. Angkor Wat. Legend claimed a god built this temple in a single night. The truth took nearly 30 years and the labor of an entire empire. Angkor Wat spans over 400 acres in the jungles of Cambodia, the largest religious structure ever constructed by human beings, larger than 200 football fields combined. King Suryavarman II ordered construction around 1113 AD, and the Khmer Empire mobilized an estimated 300,000 laborers alongside 6,000 elephants just to haul sandstone blocks from a quarry 50 kilometers away. 5 central towers rise 65 meters into the sky, arranged deliberately to mirror the mythical peaks of Mount Meru, home of the gods in Hindu cosmology. A moat 190 meters wide encircles the entire complex, stretching 1.5 kilometers on each side, a reflective barrier so massive it functions almost like an inland sea. Angkor Wat wasn't only a temple, it was the political capital of an empire that at its height controlled more territory than modern Egypt, with a city surrounding it larger than Los Angeles. The temple survived a sacking in 1177, centuries of jungle overgrowth, and the brutal Khmer Rouge regime in the 1970s, and it has never once been fully abandoned. Nearly 900 years later, it remains the largest religious monument ever built. But an empire that could raise this with sandstone and elephants is nothing next to what one Arctic nation built to survive conditions that actively try to kill anyone who steps outside.
Topic number 5. Yamal LNG plant. Standard construction equipment fails here. Metal turns brittle here. Workers can only step outside in short shifts before frostbite sets in. And this is exactly where humans decided to build one of the largest industrial plants on Earth. The Yamal LNG facility sits above the Arctic Circle in Siberia, built to extract and freeze natural gas in temperatures that regularly drop below -50 degrees Celsius. Engineers had to design entirely new cranes and machinery capable of functioning in conditions that would shatter regular steel on contact. The plant sits on permafrost, ground that's supposed to stay frozen year-round, which means every structure had to be engineered so its own heat wouldn't destabilize the earth beneath it. Specialized ice-breaking tankers now navigate through ice-choked Arctic waters to carry liquefied gas out of this facility, guided along one of the most dangerous shipping routes on the planet. Humans didn't just build a massive industrial plant in a remote location. They built one in a place actively trying to kill everyone who works there, and it still runs every single day. But the next structure on this list wasn't built to survive nature. It was built because 10 million people died trying to keep an enemy out. Topic number 4. Great Wall of China.
10 million people died building a wall that one man brought down in a single afternoon by simply opening a gate. Warriors on horseback used to appear without warning across northern China, tear through villages, and vanish before any army could respond. That threat is what drove the construction of a wall stretching more than 21,000 kilometers, long enough to cross the continental United States 4 times over. Construction spanned roughly 2,500 years, passing through different emperors and different dynasties, each one extending the same relentless project. The final major phase alone took 200 years to complete. At the height of construction, up to 1.5 million people worked simultaneously, peasants, prisoners, and soldiers, conscripted into a project that would eventually claim an estimated 10 million lives. Watchtowers dotted the wall at intervals, where guards lit signal fires to warn of approaching enemies, an alarm system centuries ahead of its time. In 1644, Manchu forces didn't storm the wall or break through it. A Chinese general simply opened the gates from the inside. 10 million lives lost, and it took one act of betrayal to make all of it meaningless. What comes next stretches even farther than this wall, and it was built to erase entire cities from a map instead of protect them. Topic number 3. Danyang Kunshan Grand Bridge. Engineers faced a choice: demolish entire neighborhoods across China, or build a single bridge over everything in their way. China needed to connect Beijing and Shanghai with a high-speed rail line, but the ground between the two cities was a nightmare of dense urban zones, more than 150 rivers, and roughly 180 roads crisscrossing the route. Instead of tearing down cities, engineers built one continuous bridge over all of it. The result is 164.8 kilometers of uninterrupted elevated structure, suspended 30 meters above the ground, the longest bridge on the planet. Construction ran from 2006 to 2010, with 10,000 workers pouring 2.3 million cubic meters of cement, enough to fill 3,800 Olympic swimming pools, and using 450,000 tons of steel, enough for roughly 65 Eiffel Towers. The bridge was engineered to withstand magnitude 8 earthquakes and even a direct impact from a warship. High-speed trains now cross it at 300 kilometers per hour. 7 of the 10 longest bridges on Earth are in China, and this one sits at the very top. But length is nothing compared to what's coming next. A single facility so large, it swallows an entire American city whole.
Topic number 2. King Fahd International Airport. Fighter jets filled these runways before a single civilian plane ever landed here. King Fahd International Airport in Saudi Arabia covers 776 square kilometers, nearly the exact footprint of the entire city of New York, all of it dedicated to one facility. Design began in 1976, construction started in 1983, and then the Gulf War erupted in 1990. The United States military seized the unfinished airport as a strategic base, filling its runways with cargo planes and fighter jets before commercial aviation ever touched the ground. Once the war ended, the airport sat dormant until 1999, when it finally opened to civilian flights. It now houses its own mosque with capacity for 2,000 worshippers, a private terminal reserved exclusively for the Saudi royal family, and 2 runways stretching 4 kilometers each. Of all 776 square kilometers, only about 5% of the airport is actually in use. The largest airport on the entire planet sits almost completely empty. But nothing on this list compares to a monument built by a single nation, not for power, not for profit, but purely to keep itself from falling apart. A country on the edge of collapse chose to answer that threat with the tallest statue human beings have ever built. The Statue of Unity in Gujarat, India, stands 182 meters tall, nearly double the height of the Statue of Liberty, base included. After India won independence in 1947, the nation faced a real threat of fracturing into more than 500 separate princely states, each with its own ruler, its own army, its own loyalties. One man, Sardar Vallabh Patel, forced and negotiated all of them into a single unified country. Without him, the India that exists today simply wouldn't exist. To honor that, roughly 3,000 workers spent 4 years raising this monument, using 25,000 tons of steel and 135 tons of iron, some of it donated directly by farmers across the country, ordinary people handing over scrap metal to help build it. 12,000 bronze panels cover the exterior, weighing 1,850 tons on their own, engineered to survive winds up to 180 kilometers per hour and earthquakes measuring 6.5 in magnitude. The total cost reached 410 million euros, completed in a record 46 months, unveiled in 2018. Every other structure on this list was built for power, profit, or survival. This one was built to hold a fractured nation together through the sheer physical weight of a single man's legacy, and it still stands over the Narmada River today, taller than anything else humans have ever built for one person.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.